Cool. Well, for those of you who don't know Jeremy West, currently, are you like the DTS leader in Montana? I know you have various roles, but I think you're running the DTS, covering the DTS right now. But,
yeah, I'm the DTS director here. I'm over our discipleship schools here in Montana. You can just say that.
Yeah. So Jeremy also pioneered and runs, or there's a lot of other people running them now, DTS Equip, which is a 6-week DTS staff and leaders training program. I highly recommend it. Well, of course, COVID's happening right now, but it's run in a number of the locations around the world. But excellent training. Those of you that heard Phil Manginelli, he does a whole thing on secularism. He's got stuff that he does teaching in Jeremy's training schools. Sorry, I think my internet's a bit dodgy right now. But I first met Jeremy in Kona, where him and his wife Molly were the DTS directors in Kona for a number of years. We worked together in Kona, running events and all kinds of things. And then Jeremy and I both moved into mainland around the same time, myself to Salem and him to Montana. Jeremy also serves with the International DTS Center in his role as a trainer, and yeah, with the DTS Equip that he runs, as well as to the mission as a whole. And yes, what he has for us on raising up staff, I'm sure he could probably talk for a week on this topic, but we only gave him 45 minutes. So Jeremy, take it away.
Great. Thanks for having me. This is, wonderful. What a good thing you guys are doing. It's really good. Yeah, good times back in the islands. That was really good times. All right, so we only have about 45 minutes. So I am just going to jump straight in. If you come to Equip sometime, or if you would have heard a similar topic, I did this in about 2 hours. So, because I like to go very big and then try to break it down, but I'm just going to throw some stuff, raising up staff, that I've just kind of found helpful, and I've seen other people do stuff which is helpful. And I've worked, obviously, as well, we've all been DTS students. Then some of us have been staff before, or you're going to be a staff right now. Then I've been a school leader, and then I've been a director, and then I work on other leadership teams around the place as well. So I'm saying that because as I've been through those different phases, it's always really helpful when you're training and teaching other people to remember what it was like for you when you were there. And that's a really good way to look at actually the value of stewardship, which I'm going to talk about. Stewardship, being a follower. If you want to be a great leader, you have to know how to follow, because it enables you so easy to put yourself in the position of the people that you're caring for. What is it like to be led by you? What is it like to help them? What is it like to be supported as someone? So anyway, I'm going to jump through that. So I'm going to share my screen. Can I do that, Amos? Do you have to give me permission for that, or can I just go for it?
We've already set the permissions. You should be able to do it.
Sweet. There we go. We good with that? Got it? Okay. There we go. All right. So there you go. That's us raising up staff. I'm going to jump through it. Take notes if you want, and come back and ask questions or fill in the gaps later on. We're just going to charge, right? So grab your snorkels. We're going down. So the first thing I want to read you is this, and it's 2 Timothy 2:2, and this is actually the theme verse for Equip, but I like it, and we're quite familiar with it. And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, and trust of faithful men who will be able to teach others also. This is obviously Paul writing to Timothy. And when I first grabbed this scripture for our Equip leadership training, it was primarily because of the idea of training, equipping, and multiplication. But the Lord shared something with me several years ago, which I've never forgotten. And he was speaking to me at the time about sonship and moving from orphan spirit and slavery into sonship. and I don't have time to go into it, but it's very profound for me. And the Lord was saying to me, basically, he said, Jeremy, a grandfather looks at a family much differently than a CEO looks at a company. And what that means is this is essentially, I think, a scripture about raising somebody up, not to be a leader, but to be the primary caregiver and direction giver for the church in that area. And Paul is speaking to Timothy. He's speaking about people that Timothy will speak to trust other people as well. So what you have heard from me, that's one generation, in the presence of many witnesses, he's talking to Timothy, to entrust to other faithful men and women who will be able to teach others also. And that's it's 4 layer there. And I'll say 2 things about this scripture, then we'll jump on. He says faithful people, or your version might have, I think that's the ESV, your version might have the NIV, reliable men. And so many times when we're raising people up, we feel like we have to make everybody succeed. Now, this is going to might cause a little bit of consternation with some of you, because we are talking about raising up staff. Okay, we're not talking about just personal discipleship along the way. We always want everyone to be successful and to walk along, but we're talking about what does it mean to platform, to develop and raise people up to a place to be trusted to represent you, the mission, your leadership to other people as well. And so it's very interesting. Paul says, listen, mate, look for the reliable ones, the faithful ones. And he doesn't mean he doesn't love people. He's talking about entrusting leadership, right? And I'll get to this stewardship to others also, okay? So you've got 4 generations, and he said, be looking for the ones, okay, that may be faithful or reliable. And the irony in this, if there's any irony, is that nobody wanted to work with Paul. And we see this in Acts chapter 9, right? Verse 26, and I'll get to this later on as well. But he says, Saul went down to try to join the other disciples in Jerusalem, but none of them there would receive him because they did not believe that he was a true disciple. Okay, which is ironic. And then, of course, we know that in Acts, I believe it's 13, Paul doesn't want to take John Mark with him, so he takes Silas and bugs off that way, and then Barnabas takes John Mark and goes that way. And here Paul is talking many years later, saying you need to try to recognize these faithful people. And it takes the Spirit to recognize calling in people as well. All right. Next slide, you're going to jump down to here. So I want to show you this very quickly. I've done a whole couple of sessions with this in the Caribbean workshop, but I want to point this out because it will lean into what we're going to talk about. This is just what I call my leadership triangle that I kind of work from a lot lately. The last couple of years, I always go to this. And if you really want to have biblical, effective, and leadership, it takes 3 elements: your own personal discipleship, your ability to follow, and stewardship. And as we go through this, we're talking about raising up staff, raising up leaders, whatever cliche or vernacular into that space. I'd like you to start using the word stewardship instead of leadership. And I want us to rework that. What does that mean? Because leadership implies position, generally, right? Stewardship implies responsibility. And of course, my discipleship and followership, these are character elements and relationship elements, okay? So I just want to throw that out there because I want to come back eventually. I'm going to kind of hit some of these things, but especially the idea of stewardship and who are we stewarding for the Lord when we're raising up staff, okay? So, before I get to that, I actually don't know everybody who's online, but I'm assuming we have a mixed demographic. We have some training directors. I saw, for example, Carlos is on there, and he's basically the training leader, has been a school leader. You've got people like Amos and Jen. They don't need introduction. Then I saw a few other names in and out of there. And then I'm sure we have a lot of first-time staff as well. So we have, if this is a workshop and you're doing it as a group, you probably have people who have never staffed before. You probably have people who have staffed before, people who are school leaders about to, or they're going into their staff training for the fall school. And then you might have training directors who are over staff and school leaders in schools. So you've got a mixed demographic. So kind of, I'm guessing that's pretty true. if that is not true, you need to send me a text right now and say, no, it's not true, but that's where we're going to go. So what I want to start with is you understanding some of this stuff. I'm going to speak directly to the staff of the students. And the other stuff I want to direct to those who are leading the staff, okay? And because there are two different perspectives I want to try to, or three different perspectives I want to give you so you can take it to where you are. I don't want you to lose interest if it's like, well, he's talking about training directors and school leaders. And I don't want you to lose interest if you're thinking, well, that's just basic kind of staff stuff. Yeah, it is. All of it goes together, okay? So a question I have for you here, and it kind of jumps back into Paul's scripture to Timothy, is, are we raising staff or leaders? And when we talk about staff development or staff development programs and how do we raise up our staff training, because we're going to talk about this a little bit. Staff training, I usually put in a different bucket to staff, to leadership development. Simply put, now there is going to be some overlap here in between, and that's fine. But when we generally talk about staff training, I think the lean is into the skills development. The leadership development part is looking at who am I as someone who's responsible to move a group of people from one location to the next, one position to the next, whether it's in their heart or in their in a physical location. We're moving from here to here, and that is much more about the individual in their character, their beliefs, how they make decisions. Not as a staff training would be, this is the decision to make in this situation, right? Or some skills training. So they go together. So when we're talking about raising up staff, you want to know who you're working with and where you are working as well. And that will help you divide some of this stuff out in training your staff and then developing the people who are your staff, okay? And I just hold that on there. So are you raising staff or leaders, right? So are you raising up staff for a program, or are you developing people to lead other people? All right, so that's some of the context we're going to jump between the two of those. So both of them are okay. Paul, my thing was this thing with Paul and Timothy. I heard this from a friend of ours. He said, leaders make staff, fathers make children. And this is going into a whole other area of sonship. But I think it's really important that when we are raising up our staff, or we are being raised up, that we are trying to develop the person, and we're trying to disciple issues of wise decision making, maturity, implicational thinking, integrity, because those things help us make decisions regardless of the decision or the context at hand, as well as putting the skills in their hands. They actually have stuff in their tool belt to pull out to apply to it. And if we are just trying to develop people purely for our programs, you'll make staff and you'll graduate YWAMers. But as people, now speaking to the trainers here and to the leaders here, our perspective has to be beyond that. In fact, as staff, your perspective has to be beyond that for your students. Are you just trying to get people to graduate DTS, or are you looking at them and saying, where are you going to be in 5 or 10 years' time? Who are you? How are you going to be a part of this mission or world missions beyond this time? So if we were talking about raising up staff, who are they? Okay, where are they going and what do you see? Okay, so as I go to the next slide, I'm going to work through it in the idea of staff. You are a staff person, or you're a leader raising up other staff. So, okay, it'll become a bit clearer here. And I need to do this. Okay. All right. Okay, so first one here. So this is a perspective piece. I think I just basically went through that. So what I'm going to talk about is, okay, who are we? What are our roles as we sit here today? Staff, training or leadership development. Seasons. And I'm going to talk about seasons. And this is where a lot of more of probably your practical type of like helps are going to come in. Well, how do we do this? And when do we do that? And how long should staff training be? And I'm not going to get too detailed on that, but I'm going to hit some of those things, and I put it in an area called seasons. Fourth thing is, what and who do we see? We have to be keeping that at the forefront. Who am I talking to? Right now I'm looking at someone, I don't know your name. And in my mind, I'm automatically thinking, okay, well, not just who are you now? This is just how I roll, right? Where are you going to be in a year? Where are you going to be in 5 years? I have this period of time to try to impart something into you that will help you make decisions for your life, right, in years to come. So what do we see in people? Who do we see? All right, and then the question is, who does God see? So when we are raising people up, we need to always be thinking, who does God see here? Okay. The other thing we're going to jump into is it doesn't matter what position you have. It doesn't matter at all. Self-development, always. You are always a disciple first. Always, always, always. You're always a son or a daughter. You never graduate that. You never graduate your own personal discipleship. The construct of our world and our culture says you graduate upward, which means you move out of DTS, and so now you're not in a discipleship training school. What does that mean? Well, now I'm the leader. I just disciple other people. Wrong. You don't. The idea in raising people up is to ask them to join you, right? To come along with you. I will help you. I will platform, right? So, and you will continue developing. We do this thing. Well, one of our values is do then teach, right? So we are doing it. That doesn't really end. We're always doing discipleship. And one of the phrases that we use a lot in training is people will be what they see. And it is so easy to tell someone what to do to be a star, do to be a leader, what to do to be a disciple. But it's actually a lot easier for them if we show them what it means, how to be a disciple, right? How to be the leader, how to walk in that, right? So start self-development, always, always, always. And I'm going to hammer this in the next slide because sometimes we rely on others to develop me, right? That can be a real danger. The last thing about here is always work from and therefore toward values. Whenever you are raising staff or your leadership or other people, always work from values. It will help you from falling into solving discipleship issues with management solutions, like policy. And especially because we are developing people here into a role to develop people. We're not just trying to solve problems. Okay, so always work from values. And if you don't know why you're doing it, or if it doesn't hold water, you need to ask about that. Okay, so let's jump on to this one. Now, you guys, you can have this PowerPoint, so you don't need to try to get everything down. But what I have here on the developing self side. So this is basically, hey, I'm a DTS staff person, talking about raising up staff. Well, what do? You know what you do? You develop yourself. Raise yourself. Okay? Raise yourself. My master's degree is in organizational leadership, but my research that I did was all on mentoring initiation, that whole dynamic in the church. And I was giving a little talk once on finding a mentor. It's very, very funny, right? How do you find a mentor when the whole idea of mentoring is so much of it is, as mentors, we should be initiating with other people, right? Initiating with mentees. But one of the points that we need to understand is if you want to find a mentor is make yourself attractive. Make yourself someone who people want to mentor, right? So you have to be always focused, you're always developing yourself. So if I'm a leader, I need to develop self. If you're not in a position where you feel like, I don't know how to develop others, I have raised up others, you need to focus on developing yourself. And the first thing I'm going to put here, this is a very big topic, but as I was preparing for this time and thinking about this time a lot lately, these are the things that came to me. Very simple, right? But I want you to lean into this. And it's fearing the Lord. The fear of the Lord is, it's the beginning, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, understanding. But it's not just, fear of the Lord, it puts us in a righter relationship with God. And there are two things about fearing the Lord as a staff person as a disciple that are so important. The first is easy, right? When you try to define the fear of the Lord, people say, what does that mean? You love God, okay? Not just, what does love God mean? It means you cherish him. You cherish what he cherishes. You cherish what he cherishes. You cherish what he loves. How does he love to see us live? Right? And so we love the Lord. What does loving the Lord mean? The second thing about the fear of the Lord that we have to understand, and you see, you've noticed I've put it on both the developing the self and developing others. So if I'm someone who's developing others, I cannot ever move away from fearing the Lord. And this is a topic which is coming back a bit more strongly now. And several years ago, I feel like the Lord was just really challenging me with this and telling me it is coming back. So I just want to encourage all of you, when you hear people talking about the fear of the Lord, you need to pay attention, because the world does not want to hear about it because they do not want a Lord. It has to be more than a cliche. Okay, so fearing the Lord means loving him. Now, the second thing about this, when I was really getting into this a while ago, the Lord said this to me after point number one, right? Fear the Lord, love God. Like, great. He said, you're loving me. He says, that's great. How well do you love other people? And this hit me like bricks. Not only because, well, quite frankly, I'm not very good at loving people sometimes, you know. Everyone has those people, those moments that just makes you not want to be a Christian in that moment, right? And you're supposed to like love everyone. It's not about liking everyone. It's, do I love them? And the Lord, basically it's this, the great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And you can't say you fear God if you don't love people, if you're not trying to love them beyond yourself. And putting God above yourself, putting others before yourself. This is how you develop self. As developing others, are you loving the Lord, what he loves first? And we think we are, but you know the process. And are you loving others? And a good definition of servant leadership is simply to make those that we serve or that follow us, to make those as successful as possible. Are we putting others first, right? Now, if you do this, people will allow you to speak into their lives, right? Because serving enables influence, right? Serving builds authority in us, spiritual authority, okay? Because this is what Jesus wants us to do. So it enables us to influence people. Fearing the Lord enables people to want to speak into my life. The second thing I'm going to get to on this table is understanding leadership. And on the developing self side, I have discipleship. So understanding leadership on the discipleship side. Right? So who am I? Now I need to understand leadership as a disciple. And on the developing other side, I've got as a steward. Now, if we just refer to this a little bit here again, this is why we have to understand leadership properly. You don't graduate out of DTS to become the boss, right? You don't graduate DTS staff to become the boss of the staff. You don't graduate school leading to become the director, to become the boss of all the school leaders. Leadership is a job. And I can't go into this in time with the time it deserves. But trust me, leadership is a job, right? And if you fear the Lord at all, you realize quickly it's a service role. And so in a self-development sense, as a staff person, I have to understand my identity as a disciple first, right? When I'm talking about leadership, okay? And as a leader of other people, I have to see myself as a steward. And the point here in stewardship is simply this. As a leader, sometimes we just see ourselves as like, here I am, and here are people here, and they are accountable to me. As a steward, you understand, right? You are a middle person between a higher authority and your responsibility. And you will be held accountable to either your base leader, to God, right? Because we're talking about biblical discipleship here, for these people and how you steward his saints, his resources, his people. You don't own the students. You're not their pastor. You're not their father or mother. Okay, you are a school leader or you're a disciple as a staff, whatever you are. You are a steward. You have been given a gift to steward a precious commodity that somebody else, that belongs to somebody else. And that actually takes some of the pressure off us to have all the answers. But also it means it puts me in a position to be able to love and to serve them, right, whether they like it or not. Okay, so that's that one. The biggest thing here is seasons. And when we're raising up staff, we have to recognize the seasons that the people are in. And I'm going to go to small to larger seasons here. So as yourself, as an individual, you have to be asking yourself the question, what season am I in? Am I a first-time staff person? How do I enable myself to be raised up? How do I enable myself to be seen as someone who is faithful to take on more responsibility? How do I build trust? How do I master the basics? Wise people are always trying to master the basics. The immature people think, been there, done that. Okay, so how do I continue to do that? So you have in your present. So I've got prep here. What that means is basically what skills in preparation, what skills do I need now to do the job that I'm in? Okay, so I'm going to go down the developing self side. Where am I? What do I need? Let's say I'm staffing a school. What do I need? I need to know how to confront. I need to know how to disciple. I need to know how to do a one-on-one. I need to know how to book a van or get transportation. I need to know how to manage a budget. I need these things, okay? How do I get prepared? Not just in myself now, but also how, in order to do the job I'm called to do. And this is where we're going to start to see the breaking away from the short-term development of staff within the context of the larger strategy of developing and raising up staff. Okay, so in our context, we're all familiar with like staff training before a school. So my staff here in Montana, they're in their staff training for the fall school right now. We're running a fall school. They're in staff training period right now, and that's a few weeks before the school starts. So these are short-term development or training seasons that we have, but they go together over time to make up the bigger picture. Okay, so as developed, you think this is a shorter period of my life that's going to contribute to a longer perspective. And perspective is very important, because if you don't have that, you'll just keep repeating the same cycle in your life, school after school after school after school. Okay, as opposed to this is where I'm at right now. What gifts do I have? What talents do I possess and passions do I have? Okay, and how do I want to develop those? Now, let me give you an example. If I'm mentoring someone personally, a one-on-one, or like if I'm a school leader with a staff person, or if I'm directed with an individual, I'll ask them a question: what spiritual gifts do you have? What's your gift set? And of course, there's always the umming and ahhing and think, well, I think mainly this and mainly this. That's wonderful. That's great. All right. So what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I'll say, well, what are some other strengths that you have? What are you just naturally good at? I'm good at being with people. Okay, I'm good at preparing a message or a topic. I'm good at administration. I'm good at, okay, what are the strengths you have? Now, what are the weaknesses you have? Oh, well, it's funny. I can only think of 2 or 3 strengths, and I can think of 15 weaknesses, right? So what comes first up? Well, time management, let's just say that. Right? And then this, and this. Maybe it's relationships I'm not good at. Maybe it's girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever it may. Maybe it's other stuff. Okay. The tendency that we have in either raising ourselves or developing other people is to try to turn the weaknesses into a strength. And I just want to tell you to forget that, right? Let it go. You're never going to turn, or anyway, that's my comforting thought of the day. You're never going to turn a weakness into a major strength, okay? We're a body with different parts for different reasons, right? That's who we are. Rather, I tell someone, okay, take this strength and this spiritual gift, and I want you to practice those, right, remorselessly for the next quarter. Okay, so if you're good at doing this, just keep doing. How can you do that better? Okay, if this comes naturally, do it better. If you're a good public speaker, start to economize your words. If you're an extrovert, start to think more before you speak. What are you good at doing, right? What comes naturally? A spiritual gift. I'm great at, I give words for people. Let's just use that one, right? Okay, this week, but I'd like that to be better, but I feel like that's what God has me, but I'm just starting out. This week, I want you to ask the Lord for a word for one person this week. And I just want you to go up to them and give it to them once this week. Every week, you're going to be looking for that one time. Now, the next week or 2 weeks later, come back together. How'd it go? How'd it go, right? And now next week, I want you to go to 2 people this week and just pray for them, and then go and deliver this to them and ask them for feedback. Okay, so this is what your strength and a gift set, right? Now, what this does, what you find is instead of turning a weakness into a strength, you need to manage your weaknesses. Get people to manage their weaknesses. I'm weak at this. Okay, well, how can you help give yourself some boundaries or some guidelines in order to manage that? But what is more effective as well as you're doing that is taking what you're good at and what you're naturally given and developing those, and that will decrease the gift. The gift, that's a bad thing. That will decrease the gap between them, because in the gaps is where we feel the weakness, right? So develop how you've been created, right, like that, and it will decrease. It kind of covers over some of the other weaknesses that we have, and people will start to develop and get more confident. You'll get more confident, right? You make yourself useful, not more valuable. There's a difference there. Okay, so remember, in developing and raising up others, we're always talking about discipleship, not legalism. Legalism says the more you do, the more valuable you are. Discipleship and discipline say the more we apply ourselves, the more useful we can become. Okay, and we can mature. So that's like early up. So in a school, you generally have a 3-week time, and that's when you start looking at yourself and you start thinking, what is my plan for this quarter? What are the things I'm going to work on? Just 1 or 2 good things, maybe 1 weakness. Don't do any, and drill down on those things. As a developer, help people discover that, right? And hold them to it. Process it with them. Then you go into the quarter or the school season. So now, instead of looking at just, we do a staff training before every school, you look at how can I raise up and develop myself over the entire quarter. Now, I've just described a way we do that as self, right? Pick something in the staff training time, listen to everything you're being taught and apply that. But then also take something that you're going to carry with you, right, throughout the quarter. As a leader developing other people, it's good to bring people in. This is how you raise up staff, right? Expose them to the speakers more privately. What does your group, who are they? What season are they in? Do you have a whole bunch of new staff? Right now, Montana, I have 7 new staff working the fall school, and I think the total contingent is about 15, right? So half of them are brand new, or maybe there's 14. So that will shift our staff training a little bit. But then over the whole quarter, what do they need to come in maybe every couple of weeks? Have like a feed the staff session. What are you feeding them? How are you helping them? How are you bringing them a word? Because you will understand the season of the whole quarter or the school better than they will. And what you're trying to do is to give them the stuff to go here, but then enough that they can develop over that time period, right? Now, I want to add to this part at the end of a school. And this is where it links into commitment and length or your view. If your staff are doing a 1-year or 2-year commitment, that means 2 or 3 or 4 schools. At the end of each school, it's very important to look back at the beginning. And as we debrief with the staff, we have to debrief with ourselves and with our own staff, right? Who were you then? Who are you now? And that growth is what you want to protect. And you want to start the process again into the next school. If we don't, what we end up doing, because we are a short-term mission, but we do it for a long time. And the quarters will fly by and you wonder, am I growing or just getting older or just getting more schools under my belt? So you want to try to see what happened in the first school that I can build onto for the next. Okay. In developing self, like this, I am emerging. How do I emerge from this task? How do I emerge from this process? How do I emerge from this school, stepping up and forward? Who do I see myself becoming? Right? Cast vision for yourself. If you don't have vision, you won't have anything to aim for. Okay? Think emerging. This is if you're a first-time brand new staff. It's okay. You are putting yourself in a position that's easy to be used. I'm emerging, right? And it gives you a goal. You don't learn just by osmosis. If you're developing other people, you need to be thinking of succession. And I'm always thinking of succession. And this is because I'm a steward, not just the boss. Right? That doesn't mean that I have to give my life away immediately, my time away. What it means is that I am open to the Lord telling me the time to step aside, and I'm actively looking to platform someone, right, to move in my place. So if you're going to raise up staff, you cannot be raising up staff if you're not thinking succession at some point, right? It is not your ministry, right? It is, you are called by one to steward the ministry in Youth of the Mission, wherever you happen to be, okay? And you're thinking succession. And this will also help you as a leader in another way. We tend to defend anything that we glean identity from. And this is why it's so important to think of the leadership triangle, leadership as stewardship, not just ownership, right? And if you're thinking succession, you're realizing this position doesn't give me identity, but I have responsibility, okay? Developing self, invite yourself to follow. You have to be able to follow. One of my biggest peeves, okay, emotional allergy in staffing, right? My humanity is going to pour out for me right now. It just chaps my hide when I feel like I have to ask a staff a favor to do their job, right? I'm just like, really? I thought this was a volunteer organization. Yet when I'm asking for someone to do something, well, I don't know, I need to, well, let's say I try to knock off at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's like, well, I guess I could do that, but I was thinking of doing something. People, we're volunteers, you know? There's a difference between being a servant and a servant leader. A servant will do anything that they are asked to do. A servant leader will see what needs to get done and can take initiative. Right? And so there's that volunteerism that's in there. Invite yourself to be a follower. Don't be looking at just graduating onto the next position. Invite yourself to follow. Okay? In developing others, this is very important. You need to be looking for every opportunity you can to invite people into your sphere. Invite them in and up, right? Why don't you join me on my teaching trip? Why don't you join me in this meeting with the other directors today? Why don't you join us in the leadership team meeting? I want you to hear what we're going to talk about, because you're looking at them thinking, who is this person? Always invite people in and up. Okay? You're making them exposed to how things operate, and it is less of a mystery. Therefore, it's less of a leap in their faith to take on more responsibility, to do more, to enter upward. Does that make sense? So as a developing self, all of you guys are always inviting yourself to follow. And as a developing of others, you're always inviting people into your world and up into the next sphere upwards. And the last thing about developing others on this is you have to understand the season of the campus of the ministry. This is a big thing right now. I know I'm speed talking because I'm trying to get through a lot. But this is a big thing right now. Montana's been around for, I don't know, 35 to 40 years. We're getting up there. But where God is taking us at DTS right now, and this is what I've been communicating to my leaders, is that we are approaching this fall school as we are pioneering. We're not restarting. We're not restarting where we left off before COVID, right? Because when you restart, what you tend to do is you tend to just let's pick up where we left off. and then you constantly feel yourself having to give stuff up to God and give it back over and let go of things. We need to look at this season that we have. This is what the Lord is telling us anyway. This is for us. We are pioneering the school. What does it take to run a DTS in Montana right now? What does it take? What do we actually need? Not what do we want, what do we need? So that everything else that we get on top of that is a blessing. So the season of our campus here in ministry, God is telling us to keep sending. He's telling us to do community evangelism, ending Bible poverty now, and he's telling us to pioneer, right? So as you're developing other people, you have to communicate that, because that raises them up into that place where they can also see the vision and the objective, okay? Okay, waypoints, navigation, beginning, destination, and present. That was in those orders deliberately. Where you start, where you are headed, and that enables you to determine where you are. And this is what I was talking about, understanding short-term training and longer-term development plans and strategies as people are growing and you're seeing more in them. And how do you give them responsibility? That kind of thing. Stewardship, talked about it. Okay, I want to share this with you really quickly, because I want to end with time for questions. Okay, let me go back. These are the most important things for us. Okay, so let's just clear the mechanism for a minute. I know I've just thrown out a ton of stuff for you guys. I've tried to, forgive me if it was too broad, but I've tried to do a bit more of a shotgun, just trusting that you guys will grab the pellets on this side that you need, and you guys can grab the pellets on that side, and you can kind of put it where you need it, okay? But this is what I want you to walk away with. Who are we as leaders? All of us. All of us. We are disciples, we are followers, and we are stewards. In raising up staff, who do we see? And this will start in your DTS as well. I'm sure someone's going to say that. Shouldn't it start during your DTS? Well, of course it should, because that's where we all come from, okay? I just went to once you're already on staff, but who do we see and what do we see in them? People are coming and they don't even know what God sees or anyone else sees inside them. God will give you eyes for that, and that will help you with your staff and with your students to see, I want to draw that out. Who does God see? Understand where we are as a school, a department, a campus, a mission. Where are we going? Right? And you want to set goals. This will help your new staff, or when you're raising staff up. If you set goals in a season, it helps them get a handle and grab onto, this is where we are going. It gives them something to do, so to speak. We are contributing to the whole, more than just running a program. Maybe that's enough for some, but for others, give them a bigger goal. Why do we do this? Both the short term and the longer term. You'll train people in how to do things, but also you help them mature with vision. Okay, and what that does, especially when you're inviting people in and up, it actually makes them useful in more ways than just being a staff in one department. You're imparting more to them than just the skills needed for the day-to-day. Most important, remember you are a disciple and a son or a daughter. Never, ever stop modeling. And sometimes some of the most impactful ways we can model is to say this: I was wrong. Or, dang it, I'm sorry. Would you forgive me for that? Any leader who can't say that they're sorry should not be in leadership. We just want to be modeling that. We're modeling not just like, oh, making great decisions and leading in the great. We're modeling lifestyle. Right? Fear God and love people. And the scripture I want to end with, I ended with Paul speaking to Timothy, but this is Luke speaking about Paul in Acts 9. And I quoted 9:26 to you. This is 9:27. And here he says, oops, I can't read it. Something's in my way. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So 26 was, remember, he tried to join the other apostles, but they wouldn't receive him. But Barnabas took him. He brought him to the apostles and declared to them, right? And my point with this, when you're raising up staff and raising yourself, these go hand in hand, guys. We have enough Pauls. I swear we try to train people into what does it mean to be a Paul today. Don't try to be a Paul. Better to work to be at being a Barnabas. Okay? Because, I mean, even Barnabas is someone who took a risk. He saw something in Paul, took a risk with him, and he let him go. And you know what? Paul gets most of the credit. You look at I can't go into this, but do a study in Acts. You look at the 4 missionary journeys, right? Paul's 4 missionary journeys. Thanks, Luke. I think the first one was actually Barnabas's. Because if you look at the second trip, Barnabas, he takes Silas and he goes back exactly the way they went the first time. Paul takes John Mark and he goes off in completely the other direction. So I think actually, and do you remember like in Acts 13, they send them out, Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul, they, Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas. And there was a division there, but Barnabas raised Paul up. So Timothy is saying, Paul is saying to Timothy, what you've heard with plenty of people looking on, entrust to faithful people who can go and teach others also. He said, give it away, platform them, give them a chance, look for it in people. We need to be people who are worthy to be looked at, okay? And what you see here is Barnabas is saying he saw something in Saul and he gave him a chance and he let him go further. Be a Barnabas in this role before you try to be a Paul. A lot more room for Barnabases these days. Okay, I'm going to quit right there, and we might have time for a couple of questions if people want it.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions you can throw in the chat for Jeremy? Yeah, I loved, I mean, every time I think it doesn't matter the topic, somehow you put in the always a disciple first. It's gonna be like a t-shirt. The Jeremy t-shirt is gonna be that. But I really like I hadn't really thought of it this way, but you're talking, we're stewarding people. You know, we're stewarding students, but we're stewarding staff. And like putting that in that perspective really helps change your way of thinking. I'm not, yeah, of course I'm a leader, I'm a DTS leader, but I'm stewarding. This is something that God's entrusted me with, which I think we kind of understand, but we got to get caught up in our Western terminology, and I really like that. So yeah, the guys in Columbus say, are there any particular outlines or resources out there for typical staff training programs prior to DTS?
Yeah, well, any of us can answer that question. The DTS Center website has some stuff on that. There's yeah, so I'm sure you've referred to it already, ymdtscenter.com, I think it is. I have a whole bunch of different like 3-week versions. We have other ones. It's just asking around, but I would start with the DTS. I guess the center website is easy to find. That's a question a lot of people can answer that one, I would say.
Yeah, we do. There's on there is actually a resource that is currently being updated. Rebecca Gibbons, she serves in Thailand, but she's on our coordinating team, is working with another one of our, well, former now, Elena and Babs, to update. We have a 2-week DTS staff training module that's on there. If you go to the website and the resources, it's there. So it's a little bit, it's older, so it's a little bit dated, but the stuff in it's like, if you don't know what to do, you can follow this. It's actually too much, but yeah, that is being updated, and when that gets updated, we'll post that on the website.
I would just add to that, Chris too from Kelowna. I would add to that. This is how I like to kind of like lay it out, depending how much time you have. The more time, the better, in my opinion, obviously. But I like to start with the foundations. What is DTS? Go over them again. And if you have repeat stuff, you say, well, I've already heard that. Just ask them the question, well, can you teach it? And if they're like, well, I don't know if I can teach it, then they can like, well, then shut up and get sit down. Let's go for it, right? Now, of course, I wouldn't say it like that. Amos might, but I wouldn't. Well, why don't you teach it, right? But I would start with the basics of DTS because you have to understand what we're responsible for. Then I would go into, there's an element of character development or bonding. So decisions we make. How do we make decisions? How do we work with people? Right? I'm not talking about some of the essential skills. I'm talking about the bigger picture stuff. The deeper principles we draw on, like integrity or character, holiness, as modeling. So you've got your foundational piece, then you've got like the character element, decision-making piece, and then there's the admin and logistics stuff. That just, no matter what you do, you can't get away from it, right? So you can divide some of this stuff up like that. So I kind of like try to put these things, the foundational piece might have some of the, how do you just run a DTS? How do you get things done? Then how do you develop the internal individual? And then having time where you do it together. Now, somewhere along that line, and I've usually found it to be very good at the beginning in the foundations part because it makes it a little less dry, is bonding. Everyone come up with their own DTS definition or mission statement and then compare them. You'll learn a lot if you do that, actually. And have a bit of bonding time in there. So those are kind of the 4 elements I like to do somewhere or another. So that's how I structure it.
That's great. Anything else, guys, before we take a break?
I'll just say too that this because COVID sent a lot of our people home and we were in shelter in place, we did a lot of our training online. So we made like a Google Classroom full of DTS training. And so while we were all apart, our staff went through the Google Classroom, and my poor staff, they can tell you it's like 100 assignments. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe it's more. And they're saying, yep, it is. And we read the book, The Complete Book of Discipleship by Bill Hull, and it had a series of questions and processes. And this by no means replaces face-to-face interaction and preschool development, but it has been a really cool kind of square one facilitator. Like, here are some common things we can all know. We know them now, we've processed them, we've engaged with them. Now what do we do with them implicationally? That can start to happen a lot quicker in the face-to-face realm. So that's a lot of what we're gonna focus on for our fall training, is the content we went over. What do we do with it now? How did it impress us or impart to us? So it's another great way of doing it. It doesn't replace anything. I just want to say that it can't be a standalone way of doing training. It's a really helpful supplement.
As I go, I'll just like to, because I know you guys got to go to the next thing. Just something is ringing around and bouncing around here, which I don't want to share with you guys. And I mentioned it briefly. The season we are in, if you've been working throughout the whole, as leaders and directors and whatever, since March, right? We are actually in an extended season of crisis management. And it might be like, oh, we got a crisis, we got to send our teams home, we got to do this. But actually, if you look at how you prepare for crisis, in being prepared to go, how you walk through crisis management, there are a lot of things that are the same. So I would communicate to your staff stuff that helps to relieve the tension, because there are so many unknowns. What you do know, you should impart to your staff. And that gives a bit of stability. For example, like listening is a good way of showing, it's just a basic way of showing respect, right? Empathy absorbs tension. And if you're trying to bring a staff together and you're talking about how do we develop and raise people up, and that, understand we're in a time frame which is not just about running the program, but how do we do it in a very uncertain time. So don't get impatient with people, but actually understand that they're actually under pressure. And if you as a leader are wondering why you feel so tired when maybe you felt like you haven't had as much to do as normal, or you're feeling a little bit like emotional and you're not really old like me or Amos, actually Amos is like 29, that's okay. But if you're wondering why, it's like, you know what? We've been under pressure for about, well, however many months since February onwards. And that actually would take its toll on people. And actually understanding that is like the cure to culture shock. Once you figure out what's going on, you feel a lot better. So communicate, not like the world's falling apart, but just rather, hey, we're in unknowns. Anything you know you can give them as a goal in their own development, as well as the development of the program, throw it out there, because that'll give them goals to move toward. Okay, I'm done. You guys be blessed.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye.
Aloha. Jen, what do you want to do? We went along on this one.
Yeah, let's take a bit of a longer break because the next section is Amos and I answering some of your questions. We got some really great questions in advance. Maybe you have some as the day's been going on. Feel free to start populating the chat with those questions. And this was anything we had sort of specified, really anything DTS related. Oftentimes when we do open Q&As at DTS workshops, this is where questions about very difficult conversations or difficult situations come up. We're happy to try and tackle those. Again, we'll just do our best. So any kind of question you've just been burning to ask someone, we will try and answer. But it's basically 4 o'clock. Let's take a 20-minute break. Stand up, move around, get some water, whatever, and we'll come back at 4:20. And we budgeted a longer break later with some run over time. So we'll just kind of play that part by ear. So we'll see you in 20 minutes.